Adios. Come on, man. Come on. Oh my God.
Was supposed to be getting rid of criminals. That's not what's happening. It has all been a farce and a lie. So it's law enforcement who is armed, who we are suggesting they are the people at danger, and they are the people who are being set upon with violence. It's a lie. I don't know what you all get out of promoting that kind of talking point, but I wonder,
it's not
years
that
from
ICE is
now,
under attack.
when you're faced
They're
with
under
what
attack
did you do
every
when
day.
authoritarianism rose in the U.S., where did you stand? I hope this clip lives forever.
In this video, Scott Jennings gets silenced by Tiffany Cross for his pathetic defense. So Tiffany Cross just takes Scott Jennings apart over his ridiculous attempt to defend ICE brutality. Instead of engaging with the reality of immigrants being assaulted and families torn apart, Scott just hides behind the usual conservative victim playing, acting like armed federal agents are somehow the ones in danger here. And Tiffany doesn't let him get away with it for a second. She flips the script, calls out the dishonesty, and delivers a big warning on authoritarianism that makes Scott just look completely out of his depth. So make sure to watch till the end to see how Scott Jennings gets silenced by Tiffany Cross for his pathetic defense.
Several violent incidents involving ICE are escalating tensions after the deadly sniper attack. The first involving an agent who shoved a mother at an immigration courthouse, and he's now been relieved of his current duties. Watch this video clip that went viral.
No, just grab her, pull her away. Pull her away. Suerte, suerte, señora. Adios. Come on, man. Come on. Oh my God. Adios. Move out. Move. Get her out of the building.
The woman and her family are here lawfully and have open asylum claims, according to a New York congressman, but they were targeted by ICE regardless. The woman was rushed to the hospital for possible head trauma. And then there was another incident caught on video in Iowa involving the detention of a grocery store worker. CNN has reached out to ICE for comment. Chuck, this is with cameras rolling.
I think it's important that the part that you left out or we left out was saying that they were showing up at a courthouse to check in. They were going through the lawful process of going through the asylum. And then the wife, the woman that was thrown down today, said, it was very touching for me. It's like, this is why I left Ecuador, is I didn't want to be beat up by the police or the gang members there seeking freedom in our country, like we have said that we're supposed to be that country every day. Let me also say this, because this has been sitting, and y'all know that this is a very personal matter for me and my team. My best friend, Denise, is TPS from El Salvador. And she has been here. She is undocumented, TPS, Temporary Protective Service. She's been here since she was 4. So she didn't come here. She was brought here by her family. And her family now are U.S. citizens. I asked her this week in D.C. about Social Security because I was making sure of something. I said, you're paying Social Security, right? Because she was saying she's being told to self-deport when TPS expires. And she said, yes. She goes, matter of fact, I make so much money, I max out my Social Security. And I was like, well, will you ever get Social Security? And she said, no, I just pay into Social Security. So folks out there that are damning immigrants and all the things, this was a girl that came in when she was 4 years old, who's being told she should self-deport, who's never, don't even speak this language of the country she came from.
Yeah, Scott?
I think when you're having thousands or hundreds of thousands of encounters, the way these federal law enforcement officers are, there are things that are going to happen. It's regrettable. I don't like these videos. And I think you said that the person had been suspended, which seems warranted. But I think we have to internalize something here, and that is we have over 10 million, maybe 20 million illegal immigrants in the country. The federal law enforcement agents who are dedicated to enforcing federal law are going to run into situations that probably are going to get out of hand. It is going to happen from time to time. You want it to be minimal, but it is likely going to happen. That in no way, shape, or form should negate the execution and the prosecution of federal laws. We have existing federal immigration laws until the Congress changes them. If they ever do, they need to be executed by our federal law enforcement. And federal law enforcement do not deserve to have violence meted out upon them because they're simply showing up and doing their jobs.
So right here, Abby showed the ICE agent clearly shoving a woman to the ground. Someone who, by the way, was here lawfully with an active asylum claim. That's already enough to tell you how messed up the priorities are. Chuck jumps in with a really human story that puts a face to what's happening here. His best friend Denise has been here since she was 4, works, pays into social security, maxes it out even, and yet she's still told to self-deport. That's the kind of hypocrisy that completely undercuts the whole DERF reloading narrative. And then Scott comes in with the most tone-deaf response imaginable. Like instead of confronting the reality of ICE agents brutalizing people, he just shrugs it off like, well, with this many encounters, stuff like this is bound to happen. That's not law and order. That's just giving a pass to abuse. He hides behind numbers, throws around 10 to 20 million illegal immigrants, as if that somehow justifies anything, and completely erases the fact that this woman was here legally. It's all about shifting the frame so law enforcement gets endless benefit of the doubt, while immigrants, even the ones following the process, get treated like disposable bodies.
We didn't see that though, and I just my moral code is just broken to hear we see a woman getting assaulted and the response is, well, it's going to happen sometimes. It's heartbreaking that this is where we are in the country. Right now, immigrants with no criminal record are the largest group in U.S. immigration detention. And where does that come from? Data from the United States government. This was supposed to be getting rid of criminals. That's not what's happening. It has all been a farce and a lie. And when I think about masked men coming to snatch people off the street, I just don't think it's a political debate. I think it's a question of our humanity. Scott, you and I, there's no love lost here. We don't agree on a lot of things. If masked men came and dragged you off here right now, I would defend your humanity and say that is not okay. You cannot snatch this person without due process. If we are not afforded just the basic rights of our human being, our human person, and we can look at something like that in a heartless way and shrug our shoulders and say, well, that's what happens, and then flip the narrative to it's law enforcement who is armed, who we are suggesting they are the people at danger, and they are the people who are being set upon with violence. It's a lie. I don't know what you all get out of promoting that kind of talking point, but I wonder years from now, when you're faced with what did you do when authoritarianism rose in the U.S., where did you stand? I hope this clip lives forever.
One of the challenges, obviously, is that there has been violence directed at ICE. No question about that. There are legitimate concerns about the safety of ICE officers, but there are tactical decisions being made right now by DHS that have increased dramatically these types of interactions between federal law enforcement and just regular civilians. And targeting is a big part of it. There's often a claim that a lot of things are being targeted, and sometimes they are, but a lot of times, sometimes they're just going in areas where there are immigrants and picking people up, and it's happening in the public for regular people to see.
The idea that comes to mind here is discretion. I think anytime you are in law enforcement, you're constantly exercising discretion, which means setting priorities about individuals and laws you want to enforce. So, Scott, you noted some laws being broken. That's true all the time. Folks are jaywalking in New York City, they're breaking laws. The question for law enforcement is that how do you prioritize those people that are most dangerous, that most impact our quality of life, that most take away from our communities? And I think what we saw in prior administrations, when I was in AUSA and we focused on these crimes, we were thinking about people who were engaged in violence, people who were truly undercutting the quality of life for our fellow citizens. We were not thinking about people who were not committing crimes, people who are disrupting families, going to places where people are exercising their rights by seeking due process in courts. And I think that, what I would call an abuse of discretion, is where, from the legal perspective, I feel a lack of ease.
When this thing started, when Donald Trump first came into office, I think that when he went after criminals, hardened criminals that were immigrants, there were outstanding warrants, and they went and found those folks, and I think they deported them. And I think the pressure of, after they got past that list, they're like, well, who else is out here? And they had this mandate by the executive branch to hit certain numbers because they are wanting to stop, and I want the border to be safe and all the things. But we have to figure out whether it's discretion or what it is of folks. 10 million, 20 million who ain't doing nothing wrong, who may have come here illegally, seeking a better life. We should have a middle ground, and it's Congress's place to fix that. I know that is the truth beyond all, but there's a lot of innocent people that really want to do good things in America who are getting sucked up into this, and it ain't right.
Let me offer just a counter argument, and that is this. We looked the other way for years on federal immigration laws. We didn't really do that much about it. And what you're all suggesting is a policy choice, which is to maybe enforce some but not all. I think I would suggest that when you start to open that door, well, maybe if you come here, it might work out for you. That's when the border is no longer secure again, because that's when people start showing up again. I mean, just tonight, we found out that the head of the Des Moines, Iowa public schools has an existing deportation order, is somehow running the school system in Des Moines as an illegal immigrant. We have a problem in this country, and it's not just my opinion. It was the opinion of the American people last November, and I think if you start to, well, you're okay, you're not, showing any leniency in a moment of crisis will be an encouragement to get right back to the crisis. That's our view.
So Tiffany just absolutely nails Scott here. She's not just arguing facts. She's cutting through the moral emptiness of, well, this happens excuse. She points out that most immigrants in detention have no criminal record, which even the government's own data backs up. That's not getting rid of criminals. That's state power being used against families and communities. And when she flips it back on Scott, saying even if masked men drag them off, she'd defend his humanity. That's the kind of principle conservatives just can't touch. Scott talks about law enforcement under attack, but Tiffany just exposes that for what it is. Propaganda that erases the violence that immigrants actually face here. And then you've got Temidayo and Chuck reinforcing the point. Temidayo frames it legally, discretion, priorities, proportionality, while Chuck lays out how Trump's ICE went from targeting serious criminals to chasing numbers. That's the real context. Meanwhile, Scott just doubles down with his favorite scare tactic, border security. He throws out "we look the other way for years" as if that somehow justifies brutality, and even trots out some random case about a school administrator to make it sound like a crisis. But Tiffany's humanity-based framing just makes his whole spiel feel hollow.
I get that.
Wait, Scott, to expand on your point. Reuters just had a poll out 2 days ago that polled Americans on which party has a better plan for immigration. This was in the field 5 days ago, so this is being polled in real time as these controversies and these outraged talking heads are ranting and raving over Trump policy. It turns out that Republicans are viewed by the Reuters poll takers 20 points higher than Democrats. So despite all the outrage, despite all the hullabaloo, right, it just still is that Republicans are doing a better job, according to the American public, and the last administration that you pointed out have failed on it. Right? They lost in 2024, and they're still losing on the issue today.
You know, I mean, I think that that's one way of looking at that particular poll number. I mean, I don't think anybody is saying that voters are flocking to Democrats on a whole host of issues. The Democratic Party is deeply unpopular, but it is also...
As a Democrat, you're exactly right.
Yeah, it is also true, though, that immigration is now among the issues that Donald Trump is underwater on. It used to be the thing that he was one of the things that he was most trusted on. It used to be the thing that he campaigned on and that he probably won on, frankly. And now more voters say they disapprove of his handling of this issue than approve of it. So that is also true.
Reuters had Republicans 20 points.
I know, but you see the difference between the two things, right? Just because they don't like Democrats on an issue doesn't mean that they do actually like what Trump is doing on immigration.
The poll has them to pick between the two parties, and in 26 and in 28, they'll be choosing between the two parties.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Donald Trump and his actions as president. And I do think that when we ask voters about that specific issue, more of them, it's about 55% of the country, say they disapprove. His approval rating with Hispanic voters has just collapsed.
It has
completely.
And there's not that's a national poll. I'm not saying the poll's not right, but this midterm election will be held in a handful of congressional seats and a few Senate races. And in the 35 marginal congressional seats, there are 15 of those, this is where I live every day, that have 35% or more Latinos. And we've seen in focus groups and studies that we've done there, two things that are alarming to me, and one thing that's very alarming should be to the world, is that they are really disgusted with what they're seeing from Donald Trump, but we Democrats haven't got their support yet. But they have left the Republican Party because of two things. One, prices hadn't went down, and they feel an anxiety. And these are marginal Latino voters. I'm being very specific about very specific congressional seats, but it's this anxiety in the community is what's really the undertow.
I think a lot of people, in a way, were surprised that they suspended this officer in that first video with the woman. I think it's because maybe it offended a lot of people's consciences. But I've also seen a lot of conservatives tonight saying he needs to be reinstated immediately, that they believe that DHS has given in to attacks against ICE officers. And I also should note that the language that they use is he's being relieved of his current duties as we conduct a full investigation. He hasn't been fired for that conduct. So, I mean, what do you think is ultimately going to happen?
I think it's even sad that this conversation alone shifted into politics. The fact that people are cheering for this guy who we saw on camera assault a woman, a mother who was here legally, who wasn't doing anything wrong. And we're talking about poll numbers. And we're talking about how people feel about Democrats or Republicans and not just the sheer humanity of these people. I think it draws a very clear contrast of the people who are saying this is okay, and that he is our champion. And yes, reinstate this, and let's normalize this behavior. It's a slippery slope, and because, look, I come from a community who has been on the receiving end of people who have been targeted, charged, abused, beaten, and murdered by authority figures, particularly in law enforcement. So it frightens me that we can look at this and conflate it with poll numbers and politics and act like people cheering him on is just a part of our American fabric. It is, but I had better hopes, higher hopes.
And wrapping this up, Scott and Joe were just clinging to poll numbers and partisan talking points, trying to spin ICE violence into just another political football. On the other hand, Tiffany is hammering the moral reality. A woman was assaulted by an armed federal agent while following the lawful asylum process. That's not abstract, that's not about partisanship, that's about whether basic human dignity still matters in this country. And that's why Tiffany's words land. She's not calculating poll margins. She's warning about authoritarianism creeping in while conservatives deflect and normalize abuse. When the debate shifts from humanity to optics, you can see who's defending people and who's defending power. And really, that kind of one-sided framing tells you everything about the bias in these conversations. And speaking of bias, are you getting tired of getting news from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite? How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, whether it's left, right, or center, are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get a 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights in media bias and political trends. So stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.